a graduate of the University of Montana in 1980. I worked for the Montana Department of Transportation for 30 years. I retired in 2012 after 17 years as a district administrator in Great Falls. And I was also in Glendive as well, and I sport a short stop in Billings. I started with HDR Engineering in the end of 2012 and have been here since. So I'm very happy that I made the change, but I have quite a bit of transportation experience, 30 years worth. With that, I will let the members of our team introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves.
I'm Lisa Fisher. I'm here in Missoula with HDR. I'm a transportation engineer. I'm also the deputy PM for the project, and looking forward to it.
My name is W.D. Baldwin with HDR. I'm out of our Bellevue office, and I'll be focusing on the traffic issues. I have been doing a number of projects in and around the area in Missoula and Montana, and so again, this is another one of those projects I'm looking forward to working on as well.
And my name is Oliver Kuhne. I'm a planner and urban designer out of our Portland, Oregon office. I sort of have two hats for this project. On the one hand, I'm going to be looking at pedestrian and bicycle issues, how bikes and pedestrians can access the area and circulate around the area, pedestrian safety, bike safety, that kind of stuff. And I'm also going to look at streetscape and aesthetics of the study area and how that affects business viability and all that.
Thanks, Oliver. And with that, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself.
I'm Ethel McDonald, and I'm active with bike and walk issues with Bike Walk Alliance of Missoula.
I'm Bob Walktown. I'm chair of the Bike Ped Advisory Board and also a board member of the Bike Walk Alliance from Missoula.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
Why don't, if you're comfortable with it, why don't we have you guys
Come on
sit
up
up here, then your mic's there, and you don't have to worry about it. Since we only have two.
Yeah. Thanks. Want to introduce yourself?
Afternoon, Alan.
I thought you were here as a bike walk advocate.
Yeah, right. The walk ethic.
Good.
And Todd.
I'm Todd Gass. I'm with the Missoula Redevelopment Agency also. Glad you could make it.
Thank you for coming. Having said that, I'm going to give you just a little bit of information, background on what we're here doing. We are looking at a front and main street conversion feasibility study. The downtown master plan for the city of Missoula was done in 2009, and it identified in that plan the conversion of the couplet, the two one-way streets, as a top priority in the plan to convert those back to two-way. So MRA has taken the lead, and they have hired HDR to do the feasibility study and determine whether or not these can be converted back and what the effects of those will be. This is by no means for anyone a new concept. It's been worked on both successfully and unsuccessfully in all parts of the United States over the past few years, or many more years than that, in fact. And in the past 10 years, I know several communities in Montana have looked at conversions and in fact have gone back and forth about it. Billings is one that went back and forth. They converted and then they went back to one ways. Helena did a partial conversion on Last Chance Gulch, where they converted part of their one ways to the walking mall in the downtown area. Great Falls has been discussing it for several years. They just haven't got the ball rolling like Missoula has. And so with that, we are here to take a look at Missoula's feasibility study. We intend to start out the process by developing a purpose and need statement based upon the input that we're getting from the groups at the opening meetings here today, and in cooperation with many of the stakeholders that are here. So we're going to start with the purpose and need, and over the next 2 to 3 days we have kickoff meetings here in Missoula. We started this morning, and we have met with stakeholder groups and interest groups, kind of individually, because we find that sometimes you get a little better input when you meet with them a little bit individually. So we have 3 meetings or 4 today, and then we're going to have some meetings on Wednesday and tomorrow with the Montana Department of Transportation in both Missoula and in Helena to talk about things like what they're going to need to see with regards to the traffic modeling and the demands and things here, because MDT has 3 routes that intersect this couplet, one at each end and Higgins in the middle, and it's important to this project to make sure that that player is on board with what we are doing. So we'll be meeting with transportation people. We had 2 of them here this morning at the first meeting, and like I say, we're going to meet with them tomorrow morning again. We're going to look at how change might affect things like the commercial businesses downtown, residential properties. The East End, of course, has got a lot of residences on it. We're going to look at public transit. We're going to see how public transit may or may not be affected by the conversion. Motorized and non-motorized use is a very, very high component of this project. Safety. We've heard safety mentioned many, many, many times. We had a little while ago, a couple of people have been hit downtown, one on a motorcycle, one guy in a crosswalk. So safety is an issue. Parking. One of the things that I heard from the previous group, parking, parking, parking. So the business owners, more parking. We're going to look at air quality a little bit because Missoula is in an area where there has been some air quality issues in the past, and so air quality is an issue. We're going to take a look at that. Future development plans. We've already heard from 4, 5, 6 different developers that have properties in downtown that they're in the process of developing. We've got some plans. I just got some information from the library folks downtown. So there are several things going on in the downtown area of Missoula. We've heard about the Firestone building and Macy's anyway, we have a lot of future development potential in the downtown. The first task that we're going to undertake is to do an analysis of the existing conditions. And what we're going to do by doing that is we're going to develop kind of a baseline of the current conditions of multimodal use in the downtown area. So that information will be available and we can determine from there what the change is going to do to that current existing condition. We're going to analyze what information has already been gathered. There's been a lot of studies and things downtown, so we'll take those studies and we'll do an analysis. But then if there is information that is not in those that we think we need, we'll gather that information. We have a traffic engineering sub already on board with us, so SLA is going to work with us on some things in the downtown. We intend to work with the city staff, MRA folks, MDT, all of the interest groups to focus on what the future transit demands would be, what economic conditions might be, and we're going to do a little bit of economic forecasting of those conditions. Now, we're going to develop some build alternatives and we'll get a feasibility report back to MRA in about 12 months. But while we're doing that, one of the components that we have talked about is the economic component. And so our economist with HDR is actually out of Ottawa. And she was on this morning, but because of the phone connections and things, we couldn't hear her. She couldn't hear about half of what we said. So I'm just going to kind of give you an overview of what our economist is going to do. And again, I say that she's going to do an overview of what the current conditions are. She's going to look at the businesses in the impacted area, try to identify what types of businesses we have in the impacted area, general operations in the downtown area, people in the downtown area, where are they coming from, the origins and destinations and things like that. And she's going to try to summarize a range of realistic expectations for what may change should this feasibility study recommend a two-way. And in doing that, she's also going to take a look at many of the areas that have already converted. Dozens of communities have done that, and some of them some time ago. So not only can you get a look at Missoula, but you can look at how realistically economic conditions changed when that couplet was changed in other parts of the country. So she will do those things for us. We will take a look at traffic management. Things like intersection geometry. We heard some things today that was kind of shocking about where the pedestrians are being hit. We're talking about turning movements. Accident histories are going to be looked at. Parking, non-motorized mobility, both pedestrians and bicyclists, and residential usage. One of the hopes, or one of the things that we've been tasked to do, is to try to improve the linkage in downtown between employment, housing, commercial, cultural, the cultural components of your community. That linkage, it's felt, can be improved, and we hope we can come up with a method of doing that. We know we can. We're going to enhance non-motorized transportation options if we can. So those things are key on our plate. And as I told you, we have had a couple of kickoff meetings, but we intend to have 2 fully public meetings. These meetings are primarily invitation. Ellen and Todd mailed out some invitations to many of the people, and just so we could get a kind of a concept from the people in the know and in particular interest sides. But we will have two public meetings where we will provide the baseline. We'll show the people what the baseline looks like, and we'll take input as to what the public wants us to see downtown. And then we'll have a second public meeting that will provide the draft feasibility study to the public for comment, so that the people that are paying us can hear what the public has to say about that feasibility study. We have also been tasked with identifying some potential sources of funding, and so we will be looking at that. The 2 routes that we're talking about, Front and Main, are federal aid urban eligible. In that particular sense, there may be some extra standards that need to be met because they are federal aid eligible. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get any federal aid funding, but because they are eligible, you still have to meet a standard. So we'll be working on that. We'll figure out how we're going to do that. And we intend to have this project to fruition about 12 months. So that's been our goal all along, and we're ready to do that. Having said that, we will give you a quick look at the area that we're talking about. Lisa, if you'd do that for us.
There's an extra map over there that we can top off of as well, but just so everybody knows, it's going to be Front and Main Street from Orange Street all the way east, or east to Madison. So we've got Higgins in there, and we're also going to take a look at a lot of key intersections from a safety standpoint, as well as trying to figure out maybe some different configurations that we could actually tie back in if it was to go to a 2-way conversion.
Go ahead, WD.
And from a traffic analysis standpoint, there's quite a few models and quite a bit of information that's already out there. Like Mick has mentioned, we're going to be working with MDT, talking to them about what they have, working with the city with the travel demand model, and just building the model that does the traffic analysis, all the way from Orange across through Higgins to Madison, up to Broadway, and kind of getting some streets that bracket all of that in the total context. And what we're trying to do is make sure that, with the one-way streets, we have one type of operation, and we know how things flow and operate. But obviously, when we change it back to 2-way, it'll be a little bit different. We need to understand what those impacts are, and we'll be looking at, adjusting those and considering those with all the different alternatives that we'd be putting forward. So it's a detailed traffic analysis at the intersection by intersection level. And I think one of the things to emphasize too, we're not just looking at, the main intersections I mentioned there, Higgins, Orange, and Madison. It's all those intersections that are in between that can impact traffic flows.
Thanks, WD. Olive?
Yeah, and then just to reiterate, I mean, this project is not just about transportation, not just about traffic functions. It's all. I mean, we're looking at the right of way from building phase to building phase in those two corridors and across streets. And part of that obviously will be in any bike and pedestrian facilities. So as WD mentioned, we're going to look at intersection crossings, safety aspects. I'm also going to be interested in bike parking, bike access to the area. I mean, is it warranted to have a bike lane there, or is any other accommodation of bicycle traffic sufficient? We're going to look into that. We're going to look at sidewalks. Are they sufficient for pedestrians walking there for the type of downtown sidewalk activity that's to be expected? Is there enough sufficient space for outdoor seating for restaurants and all of that? So those are some of the issues we're going to be looking at.
Thank you. And so with that, we've given you a kind of a nutshell overview of what we're looking at, and what we've asked everyone to do is to tell us what your thoughts are on the project, any concerns you may have. Do you see room downtown for improvement? Is there room for improvement? So that's why we asked you to come, and we're just writing as fast as we can, so we're just waiting for some wonderful ideas. Ethel?
Did you say me first?
Yeah, you can go first. Ladies first.
I don't care. Do you want to go first?
Help yourself.
Yeah, that's
I'm just picking on you.
what I thought.
Go ahead, Bob.
Okay. Again, I would reiterate the safety issue. That is a prime issue for everyone concerned downtown and throughout Missoula, especially those of us who are promoting better facilities for bikers and walkers. There are issues throughout town. Some have been addressed, some improvements have been made. I see some areas that are still questionable. Along with safety, convenience for all, particularly, again, pedestrians and cyclists. They're moving slower through the downtown area than motor vehicles, so they have a chance to see what commercial businesses are there, where they might want to stop and spend some of their money. One area that I think has been addressed a little bit in the master plan, I noticed in the diagram, looks like the north side of the street is indicated for back-end angle parking, and the other side of the street is indicated for front-end angle parking. I would like to see consistency and preferably back-end angle parking. It's safer for all concerned, especially for cyclists in the street. They're more visible to drivers pulling out when they're exiting a back-end angle parking situation. They're looking right at the oncoming traffic, be it cyclists or other motor vehicles. Question as to whether they should be cycle tracks or bicycle lanes, depending on amount of space available. We've had the new cycle tracks on North Higgins for, what is it now, 3 years, approximately. I tend to avoid them. I'm not particularly happy with the intersection treatment for the current cycle tracks.
Do you know why that is?
Primarily the lack of visibility for cyclists. They're not as visible to the motor vehicles, either oncoming left-turning vehicles or those moving in the same direction going to make a right turn. As the cyclist comes back off the cycle track into the intersection, they suddenly appear and oops. It makes it difficult there. So some other intersection treatment if there were going to be cycle tracks.
Okay.
I would encourage bike lanes on these where possible. I know particularly Front Street, further east of Higgins, tends to get a little on the narrow side and probably not room there. The issue there is that is a popular bike route, at least down to the the access to Kiwanis Park, though there are some other possible routes via the Riverside Trail.
Yeah.
But if there are no bike lanes there, the cyclists are going to be in the lane, which slows all the traffic down to the bike speed. And that frequently gets motorists a little impatient and crowding the cyclists. So discomfort on both sides. Another one that is probably going to be looked at, but I know my wife mentioned this because she does volunteer work at the library, and many of us spend a fair amount of time at the library. The street just west of the library, the connector street, is currently a one-way northbound only, and looking at the treatment of that street as a connector might be a definite issue.
Yeah. We heard it a number of times this morning, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all I had made notes on. Ethel?
With regard to your safety concerns, can you specify what kind of incidents happen? I mean, is it pedestrian crossings or bicycle crossings? Is it right turns that cut off bicyclists, or what's sort of the major issue?
I'm not aware of any specific incidences on these two streets at this point. I haven't seen the crash reports.
Right. But just anecdotally, from your experience, your personal experience, what are sort of the sticky points there?
I haven't really noticed any as I'm riding around those.
Okay.
Void.
Somewhat. I do hit front fairly often if I'm heading to the post office. Coming north on Higgins, I'll take that right and take front to Ryman, and Ryman up to the post office. Makes a good route. But that's fairly quiet in there, and making that right turn, there's seldom traffic because the front has been stopped at Higgins, so I've got a pretty clear access to Ryman before the platoon comes behind me, so it works out pretty well.
I think I'll first just address the existing conditions. And in general, I'm okay with biking on both Front and Main and do it frequently. I would see, well, before I don't want to forget this, I do question the one configuration at Orange where if you're coming east on Front, you can't go straight from the right-hand lane. And I just find that a really awkward place, either on bike or with cars. It took me a long time to get used to it, to get over there when I want to go straight, which I generally do because Higgins is better biking for me than Orange Street as far as where I'm going. While Bob and I both are on the Bike Walk board, Alliance for Missoula board, we don't necessarily agree, and neither of us really speaks for the group. I don't have the problem with the cycle tracks. I was not necessarily in favor of them originally simply because it was such a large expenditure of money that I thought we could have bought, a lot of paint for bike lanes. But that was something that downtown wanted to do, and I thought it was really commendable. They were interested in making it a better biking and walking atmosphere, and the primary thing was not for bicyclists like me and Bob, but for the timid or hesitant or the ones who would think about it, or the people with kids and so forth. So in that way, I think it has been a success. The bike corral parking has been great. The reason I feel the cycle tracks are okay and the intersections are okay, it just means you have to watch. I mean, people making left turns, I think they're getting better. I seldom have anybody cut me off on that, and I'm watching for it. And we generally make eye contact, and they wait. So I feel it's a matter of education, and it's happening. I have not really been excited about changing the configuration of Main and Front. And my biggest concern is, and I'm looking at this as a motorist, and I almost never, ever drive down Higgins. I just hardly ever drive, period. But what I'm concerned about is if you change Front and Main to two-way, you're going to have right turns and left turns on both of them. And right turns really hold up traffic. I mean, it's those damn pedestrians, you know. And but it's a fact, and so then you get, you know, the road rage and so forth, which makes it more dangerous for bicyclists and pedestrians. But that's my biggest concern: is if you make those two streets two-way, is you're going to have the right turns. Like right now, right turns on. Well, Front is not bad. You have the right turn lane and no left turn lane. But when you get to Broadway, you have the right turn really getting held up. And the bike has to negotiate around the person who's already turned into the bike lane waiting for pedestrians. But that isn't too serious because there is a left turn lane. So you've got one lane that's moving. But if I don't know what Higgins is going to look like if you have right turns possible on Front. Well, you do have that now, because that is two-way. What am I thinking? I guess I'm mainly concerned about the right and left on Main. I just think that would really, really mess up Higgins traffic. For the angle parking, I wasn't aware that was being looked at. I can't imagine there's room for angle parking on both sides. And for sure, that would make that street horrendous for bicyclists. Maybe I've misunderstood, but when it comes to the parking issue, I look at the fact that if we're looking at and I tend to look at this from Higgins to to Orange. Maybe I should be looking more from Higgins to Madison. But from Higgins to Orange, you've got the parking garage within 2 blocks, and you've got a bunch of parking down in Karis Park area. I guess maybe that's private, I don't know, or fee. It's fee, isn't it?
No, it's public.
It's public, but you have to pay.
Yeah, it's all paid for.
Yeah, but so, and I'm sympathetic to the downtown. I want to see the downtown prosper, but I really don't think more parking is the answer. And I know a lot of people who own the businesses do think that it's a parking problem. But I just want to see us encourage more transit. Oh, and then that's the other question on the transit. Right now, I do think that the one-way streets work fine for transit. I use the bus, the number 1 bus frequently, and it goes in town, it comes on Main, and leaving it goes on Front, and parks, and you get to know that when you're going one way, you're on Front, and the other way on Main if you're at the library. So I guess, and I agree with Bob, that northbound there next to the library, it's not Patty, I don't know what, it's one of the presidents, what? Washington, yeah. That's kind of a problem. It's an inconvenience for me on a bike a lot of times. And Maine is slightly inconvenient for me on a bike if I'm coming that way from the north. But so I can't think. My main thing on when it comes to bike lanes, while I'm comfortable riding on Front in Maine now, again, if we want to encourage those who are hesitant about biking in traffic, we need the marked bike lanes. Yeah.
Thanks, Ethel. Any questions? Go ahead.
What about bike parking? Do you think there's sufficient bike parking in the study area?
I think it's probably okay. It's kind of interesting. You can compare it to the hip strip on the south side, and you've got lots and lots of bike parking,
Yeah.
but they are full. But that's good.
Right.
So, except that a lot of them do live there, I guess, so they may be parked there all the time. But no, there really isn't enough bike parking right now on Front and Main. Yeah, and that's something that with our policy, the store owners usually have to pay a part of that to get a bike parking.
Thank you. Anything else, Alma? WD?
This is Bob again. I'd like to go back to the pedestrian crossing issue, and the issue that Ethel raised is very, very critical throughout downtown particularly. The right turns, and to a certain extent the left turns also, are held up by pedestrians crossing. And I think there's a definite education issue, and we've discussed this a bit in the Bike Ped Advisory Board. And I know it's not part of this project, but I'd just mention it again, that education for pedestrians, that it is illegal actually for them to start crossing after the flashing countdown begins. And that's something that many pedestrians and cyclists using the crosswalks don't realize, that if they're in the crosswalk area, they need to abide by that countdown timer and not start after it starts counting. That then gives the motorists who are turning right that little bit of leeway time to make their right turn after the pedestrians have stopped beginning to cross. So that's one of those issues of education.
If I could add my 2 cents worth there, I'm one of those that if there are 5 seconds left, I know I can make it. So I go, and I do it all the time. But I would almost say the opposite way, if we could really educate pedestrians and make them wait another 10 seconds after the traffic goes, you could get several right turns made.
Before they ever
Yeah, and to me, that would make more sense, but I don't know of how you could ever educate. But Bob does have a good point there. Usually, though, it's that first mass of pedestrians, and the cars have to wait for the ones there, and then the ones who are coming the other way. So I don't really think the countdown hurts there. I don't dash across if the car is ready to make a right.
Yeah, in my experience, pedestrians here in Missoula are pretty well behaved. I was here vacationing with my wife last fall, and there was one of the signals malfunctioned, and it didn't turn for like a minute or two, and people just stood there.
Really?
It was like in Portland, they would have walked like after 5 seconds.
We want to thank you both for taking your time to come over here this afternoon out of your days and give us your input. We appreciate that. We will be working on this study diligently for the next 3-4 months, and then we'll bring it back and we'll start the public process. But we want to thank you for taking time to come over here today and visit with us.
And I guess we're supposed to speak in this for the recording, but I want to thank you for doing this special time for bike ped concerns, and I'm really disappointed more people didn't show up. We discussed it in one of the groups where I was with several people who, were all interested. Some of them may come at other times. Some are businesses and so forth, but I thank you for making this special time for us.
Thank you very much, both of you, for coming today. I think we're good. Anything to add, Alan or Todd? Thank you.
Thanks.
I've never been able to figure out that one way at Washington next to the library. The other day, I was going south on Washington, and I realized probably the reason that's one way is because you'd have to go counter, because of the offset, you'd have to go wrong way on Main to go south on Washington. These go the two ways, and that solves that problem.
Parallel park car opening the door.
Yes, we've definitely got concerns, and the Bike Ped Board, I hope the recording is still working. The Bike Ped Board did submit a recommendation to the city several years ago requiring a minimum 6-foot bike lane next to parallel parked cars. Ideally, we'd like to see more than that, if possible, but an absolute minimum of a 6-foot bike lane next to parked cars so that the cyclists can get out of the door zone on that 6-foot. A 5-foot just doesn't do it because car doors can open up to 4 feet away from the side of the car. So that 5-foot bike lane is not really sufficient, and 6-foot is iffy. We'd like to see 6.5 or 7, but then you're starting to almost look like a travel lane, and that becomes an issue then. So trying to get those balance in there. If possible, possibly a buffer area marked between the parking lane and a 6-foot bike lane would also be great to have that out there. So, thank you.